Good evening, everyone. I'm Rabbi Feinstein. This is Valley Beth Shalom, live and online, and it's Sukkot. And every night this week, in celebrating Sukkot, we've done something really special. We've had a cooking night, we've had family games night, and tonight, at 5 o'clock, we're going to have a little bit of stories to get our Sukkot going. And I hope that you're having a very, very nice holiday and enjoying some time together. And if you're not together, I hope at least in your thoughts you're together with family and friends. So we're going to talk about a Sukkot story, wonderful story that I love very much. And it's a story that I love to tell this time of year. It's about a sukkah. Actually, it's about one of the most famous Sukkot in the whole world. It's the famous sukkah of Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz. Well, once upon a time, many, many, many years ago, in a place far away from here, there lived a great rabbi, Rabbi Pinchas. He lived in a town called Koretz, so he was Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz. He was beloved. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. And because everyone loved Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz, from the time he got up in the morning till the time he went to sleep at night, there was always somebody with him, always people around him. Early in the morning, his students would come to his house, and as soon as Rabbi Pinchas had gotten out of bed and got ready, got washed up, they were ready to learn with him and ask him questions and to pray with him. And during the course of the day, he would teach classes so people could learn the Torah. And during the evening, people would come and ask him for help. People would ask him for advice when they had problems, and people would ask him for a blessing. A man and a woman would come and say, "We're getting married, Rabbi. Can you give us a blessing?" A couple would come with a new baby and say, "Would you bless our new baby?" People would come and say, "Our children are growing up and we're growing older. Can you give us a blessing as we grow older?" And when people were sad, when they were sick, when bad things happened to them, they would come to Rabbi Pinchas and he would give them a blessing, and that would make them feel strong and make them feel so much better. And on Shabbat, oh, on Shabbat, it was even better. Everyone baked an extra challah. And they actually lined up at Rabbi Pinchas's house, and they would come to him and say, "Rabbi, taste my challah and tell me if it isn't the best challah you ever had in your life." And sure enough, Rabbi Pinchas would get a big smile on his face because he loved challah. And he would have a nibble, and he'd say, "Oh, like heaven." And he'd have another nibble, and then another challah, and another challah, and another challah. And that's the way it was every day of the week, every hour of the day. There were always people around Rabbi Pinchas, and especially on the holidays. Oh, it was so wonderful. And especially on the holiday of Sukkot, when we go outside and we build a sukkah, just like this one here. And we sit outside in the sukkah, in the sunshine in the daytime, and in the cool of the evening at night. And we feast and we celebrate and we drink and we sing and we tell stories and we're together as families. And everyone crowded into a beautiful sukkah at Rabbi Pinchas's home. And they sang songs and they said prayers and they ate wonderful things. They brought him cookies and cakes. And, people said, you haven't lived until you've visited the sukkah of Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz. Well, Rabbi Pinchas was a very happy man because he liked having people around. He liked knowing that there were people there to celebrate with him and to enjoy all the gifts of life. But, there was one thing that bothered Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz. And every year it bothered him more and more and more. Because he said, "I'm a rabbi and I love having people around me. But to be a great rabbi, to be an important rabbi, I have to write a book. Every great rabbi has written a book. Rabbi Akiva helped write the Mishnah. And Maimonides wrote two great books, the Mishnah Torah and the Guide for the Perplexed. Rashi wrote commentaries on the books of the Torah. Every great rabbi has written a book. In fact, when every great rabbi writes a book, even when his life is over, people still read his book. And when they read his book, it's like he's alive all over again because he's talking to them. And I, Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz, I haven't written a book. I can't write a book. There's people around all the time. When am I going to write a book? How am I going to write a book? And every year, this bothered him more and more and more. So one year, just before Sukkot, right after the high holidays, just before Sukkot, he was such pain. He had such pain in his heart. I have to write a book. I have to write the book so that when my life is over, people will still hear my voice in the world. They'll read my book. My book will make me immortal. I'll live forever because people will always read my book. I have to write the book. But to write the book, I have to make sure that people don't bother me. So Rabbi Pinchas made a very strange prayer. He turned his eyes toward God and he said, "Dear God, take the people away." Can you imagine such a prayer? Take the people away, said the rabbi. Now, because Rabbi Pinchas was a very holy man, God wanted to check with him one more time. And so God said to him, "Are you sure that's what you want? You love these people, and they love you, and they need you. You're their rabbi. You're there to give them blessings when good things happen, and you're there to give them strength when bad things happen, and you're there to teach them Torah whenever they're seeking wisdom. Are you sure that's what you want?" "That's what I want," said Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz. "Take the people away so I can write my book." And God said, "Okay, if that's what you want." And then a very strange thing happened. Nobody came to his door. Nobody came. Nobody came with a plate of cookies to celebrate the holiday coming up. Nobody came with a challah. Nobody came with a question. Nobody came to ask a blessing. Nobody came to the door of Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz. It's so quiet. It's so quiet. So Rabbi Pinchas sat down and he took his pen and he took a piece of paper and he wrote the first line of the book. Just the first line. That's all he wrote. And when he finished it, he said, "Wait a minute. It's almost Sukkot. It's almost time for Sukkot. How am I going to build a sukkah?" Now, usually what would happen is all the people from the community would come, and the men and the women with their tools, and they would help the rabbi build a sukkah, and all the children would come and they would decorate the sukkah, but nobody came. Nobody came. He went to the door and he looked outside and there were people walking by and he said, "Doesn't anybody want to come and help me build a sukkah?" But they were so busy, they didn't hear him. They didn't see him. So the poor rabbi said, "Oh, I guess I have to build it myself." Now, rabbis are good at many things. Some rabbis are good at teaching, and some rabbis are good at giving blessings, and some rabbis are good at eating challah, and some rabbis are good at telling stories, but no rabbis are good at building stuff. And he was terrible. So he took out the boards and the poles of his sukkah, and he started pounding a nail in, and he smashed his thumb. Ow! Ow! And he pounded a nail, and he pushed another nail, and he put the boards up, and it was ugly sukkah. But at least it stood up. And he got some leaves, and he put them on top, and the leaves were kind of brown and yucky. And there were no decorations for the sukkah. It was a skinny, scrawny, ugly old sukkah, but it was a sukkah. And Rabbi Pinchas took his paper and his pen, and he sat down in the sukkah, and he wrote a second line of the book. And then he said, "Boy, it's strange to sit in a sukkah by yourself, with no friends and no family and no one around. Won't anyone come and share my sukkah?" And he went to the door of the house and he went out into the street and he said, come into my sukkah and join me and we'll make a blessing together. But it's like nobody saw him. Nobody heard him. Nobody came into his sukkah. And the rabbi sat by himself. And of course, nobody brought challah, and nobody brought cookies, and nobody brought food. And all he had was some old stuff in the kitchen that he tried to eat, and it wasn't very good, because he also wasn't a very good cook. And there's a wonderful ceremony, a beautiful ceremony called Ushpizin, Ushpizin is a fancy word. It's in the language of Aramaic, an old language, and it means inviting in. And what we do is we invite the great heroes of our tradition to visit our sukkah. So he said the famous prayer of Ushpizin. And when he got to the special point, he said, Abraham, our father, come and welcome, come and be welcome, come and visit my sukkah. And all of a sudden there was a shining light, and there was Abraham. But he didn't come into the sukkah. He sat outside. And Rabbi Pinchas said, Sarah, our mother, let Sarah, our mother, come and visit my sukkah. And there was a shining light. And there was Sarah, the mother of the Jewish people, and she stood outside. And he said, let Moses, our teacher, let him come and visit our sukkah. And Moses came, but he stood outside. And he said, let Miriam the prophetess come and sing in my sukkah. And Miriam came, but she stood outside. And he said, let King David come. But he stood outside. And finally, Rabbi Pinchas said, let God come and fill my sukkah. Well, there was a shining light in the corner. And from the light came a voice, poor Rabbi Pinchas, don't you know that where my children aren't welcome, I'm not welcome either. I can't come into your sukkah. And that hurts so much. Rabbi Pinchas said, oh my God, I've made a mistake. Please, God, undo my prayer and bring me back my people. Bring me back my friends. Bring me back the community. Bring me back my people. And God, because he loved Rabbi Pinchas, said, are you sure that's what you want? Yes, bring me back my people, said the rabbi. But you won't get to write the book. I know, but I need my people more than I need to write my book. Very well, said God. Your prayer is reversed. They will come back to you. And all of a sudden, there was indeed a knock at the door. And Rabbi Pinchas ran to the door, and there was everybody. The whole community was there. They came back to his yard, and they saw that sorry, terrible, flimsy little sukkah he built, and said, oh, Rabbi, we can do better than this. And the people of the community, the men and the women, they took out their tools, and they started building the sukkah. And they built a big, beautiful sukkah. And the children of the community came and they hung up paper chains and they put up fruit and pictures on the wall. And the sukkah was as beautiful as it ever was. And people came with trays of cookies and cakes and foods and delicacies. And everyone came up to the rabbi and said, Rabbi, taste my cake and tell me if this isn't the best cake you ever ate. And Rabbi Pinchas would smile. And he took a piece of the cake and he said, oh, what a cake. A cake like the angels in heaven make. And the people filled the sukkah. And they filled the sukkah with songs. And they filled the sukkah with food. And they filled the sukkah with stories. And they filled the sukkah with celebrations. And Rabbi Pinchas, he taught. And at the end of his teaching, he said, let Abraham and Sarah come into the sukkah. And the sukkah filled with light. And Abraham and Sarah came in. And let Isaac and Rebekah come into the sukkah, and Yitzchak and Rivka, they came to the sukkah. And let Yaakov and Rachel and Leah come to my sukkah. Let Moshe Rabbeinu and Miriam come to my sukkah. Let Melech David, let the King David and King Solomon come into my sukkah. They all came into the sukkah. And Rabbi Pinchas said, and let God himself come into my sukkah. And the sukkah filled with warmth and love and light. And everybody knew that God himself was in that sukkah. Well, you know what happened? He never did write that book. Just the 2 lines he wrote, that's all we have. Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz never wrote the book. But you know what? People still say, to this very day, that if you haven't visited the sukkah of Rabbi Pinchas of Koretz, you don't know what a holiday is. Because it was so filled with love, so filled with joy, so filled with friends, so filled with community. And that's the way a sukkah should be. So we invite everyone into our sukkah, our families and our friends, our community, everyone in the world. And we invite all of the ancestors of our people, Abraham and Sarah, and Isaac and Rebekah, and Yaakov and Rachel and Leah, and Moshe Rabbeinu and Miriam the prophet, and Melech David, the King David, and Melech Shlomo, King Solomon. And we invite God himself. Because if our sukkah is filled with the people we love, then certainly God is there to celebrate with us. And we too will be remembered like Rabbi Pinchas for the love and the warmth that we shared on this very special holiday. I want to wish you a very, very special holiday. Thank you for being part of our story time tonight, and take good care. Shana Tova and Chag Sameach.